Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping back in time to a period when the world was starting to get a whole lot smaller. New connections were being built across continents, and they brought incredible progress. But they also came with a terrifying price.
So think about trade routes. You're probably picturing silk, spices, gold, right? Well, between 1200 and 1450, those new connections across Afro-Eurasia were carrying a lot more than just goods. They were carrying both unbelievable opportunity and unimaginable disaster, often on the very same caravan.
Right, so when we talk about the Silk Road, it's easy to just think about luxury items. But during this era, something way bigger was on the move. We're talking about entire ecosystems being transplanted, crops that would completely reshape continents, and on the flip side, germs that would threaten to wipe them out.
Okay, let's kick things off with the good news, the incredible upside of this newly networked world. You're about to see how just a few new crops traveling along these trade routes totally transformed human history.
Let's start with something you probably have in your kitchen right now, the banana. Now, you might think of bananas in Africa as going hand in hand, but they're not actually from there. Their incredible journey began thousands of miles away, over in Southeast Asia.
And this is where things get really fascinating. A single fruit literally changes the map. The banana arrives in Africa, and it's a total game changer. See, for the Bantu-speaking peoples, their staple food was yams, but yams just couldn't grow in the dense rainforests. But bananas loved that climate. And just like that, boom, a whole new part of the continent opened up for settlement, and populations began to soar.
Okay, now let's hop halfway across the world to East Asia, because a very similar story was unfolding in China. This time, the agricultural superstar was a new kind of rice that came from what is modern-day Vietnam. It was called Champa rice.
So what was the big deal with this rice? Well, it was basically a super crop. It was incredibly hardy, resistant to drought, but the real kicker, it grew so fast that farmers could get 2, sometimes even 3 harvests in a single year instead of the usual 1. For a country the size of China, that is absolutely revolutionary.
And the result of all that extra food? You guessed it, a massive population boom. China's population just skyrocketed, pushing past 100 million people. This wasn't just a small increase. This was a fundamental reshaping of an entire society, all powered by a single grain of rice.
Meanwhile, over in Europe, something similar is happening. New fruits, things we take for granted like oranges and limes, start showing up, making their way through those busy Mediterranean trade networks.
And this is just a perfect example of how these connections could quite literally make people healthier. Muslim traders brought these citrus fruits in, and all of a sudden, European diets got a huge boost of crucial vitamins. This likely made a real difference in people's health, especially during long, hard winters, centuries before anyone even knew what a vitamin was.
So, okay, we have population growth, new settlements, better health. It all sounds fantastic, doesn't it? But there was a catch. A massive, terrifying catch hidden within these very same connections. Because the very same networks, the same paths that carried life-giving bananas from Southeast Asia and super rice from Vietnam, they also became super highways for the spread of deadly disease. So now we have to turn to the other edge of that sword. We're about to see how this new global connectivity unleashed the most infamous and destructive pandemic the world had ever seen. And the crazy thing is, it all started with a period of peace. Seriously. The Mongol Empire was so vast that it created the zone of stability called the Pax Mongolica, or the Mongol Peace. For merchants, this was a golden age. You could travel for thousands of miles with much less fear of being robbed. And so, trade flourished like never before. But here is the terrifying unintended consequence. Those safe, busy trade routes that were so fantastic for business, well, they were also the perfect pathways for disease to spread. They basically rolled out the red carpet for the bubonic plague, what we call the Black Death, allowing it to travel faster and farther than ever before.
I mean, just look at this timeline. You can literally trace the plague's devastating journey right along the major trade routes. It starts in China, then bam, it's racing west along the Silk Roads. By the late 1340s, it's on ships, hitting ports in the Middle East and Europe. This was a pandemic moving at the speed of commerce.
The death toll? It's just staggering. It is almost impossible to wrap your head around, but some estimates suggest that as much as half of the entire population of Europe died. Society was completely broken and had to be rebuilt from the ground up. So after seeing both sides of the story, what's the big takeaway here? What does this all teach us? Well, it shows that connection is never simple. It's always a double-edged sword.
This whole period is the ultimate proof of that. On one side, you have the boon, new crops creating more food, fueling population growth and improving health. On the other side, you have the blight, the bubonic plague causing mass death and tearing societies apart. And the key thing to remember, both traveled on the exact same paths. They were two sides of the very same newly connected coin.
And you know, this is such a powerful lesson for us right now in our own hyper-connected world. The networks have changed for sure. We've swapped camel caravans for fiber optic cables, but the fundamental principle is exactly the same. It really forces you to ask a tough question. As we celebrate the incredible speed that ideas and opportunities can travel today, are we paying enough attention to the threats that are traveling right alongside them?